All right, hi class. I hope everyone's doing well out there. This week we're going to be focusing in on a new type of tweening. So, up until this point, you've been getting to know the classic motion tween. And just to remind you, it's called classic because this was the original tween style within Flash animation. And remember, the software we're using, Animate, originated from Flash. So that's why they call it the classic motion tween. And there was a time when that was the only way we could tween objects other than with code. So we've progressed to what's called a motion tween. So take the classic out of it, and it's just a motion tween. And Adobe has given it this name, but it does everything that we've learned so far with a classic motion tween, plus a whole lot more. So we can really precisely create tweens for multiple property animations. What does that mean? Well, you know how we'd have an object, maybe we had an object spinning on the stage. Well, with a motion tween, and there are ways of doing this with a classic motion tween, but it's a lot harder. But with this new updated motion tween, we can have an object spinning, we can have it growing at the same time or at a different time. We can have it fade out, fade in, we can have it stop spinning and then start up again. Much easier. And we'll be seeing this in the next exercise when we look at the motion editor. We can actually edit these keyframes and these tweens more accurately with its very own editor, which takes us out of the timeline a little bit. So our timeline here, which we're getting used to, we can leave this for a little bit and edit, really fine tune how our tweens look. And motion tweens look really smooth as well. It's just more modern looking. So we're going to look at how to do that. Another great thing with a motion tween that some of you are going to really enjoy, and I think things are going to really click with this once you learn how to use it, and this will apply to your midterm project. You're required to use motion tweens on that project, by the way. That once you learn how to do it, it's actually very easy to use, and you can create some really complex looking motion and other properties being tweened. Things can look really complex while it wasn't that hard to create. So I'm going to take this nice and slow. I'm going to be pointing to all the important aspects here while we're learning. And I definitely recommend you practicing this. So that means maybe repeating this exercise and getting to know this, because this is very foundational moving forward in this class. Once you get a handle on motion tweening, things will really click a lot better moving forward. Okay, so in this exercise, we are going to be learning a bunch of things. We're going to be creating a basic motion tween. We're going to look at modifying what's called a motion path. So this is very exciting. When we get to it, you'll see why this is a lot of fun. We'll look at orienting the tween target to a curved path. We'll look at swapping tween targets, swapping motion paths, and creating motion paths with a drawing tool. This is all really fun stuff. So I'm hoping a lot of you are used to your drawing tools by now. A little bit. You don't have to be professionals at it quite yet. One thing I just want to point out right off the top, and some of you had emailed me about this, already is sometimes when we're using Animate on a smaller, like, laptop screen, our toolbar here hides some tools. Well, where are they hidden? Very often they're stacked on each other. So I know for a fact that the oval tool becomes hidden, or the rectangle tool. One of the two becomes hidden on a smaller screen. And how do you find them again? Well, you simply press and hold, and you'll see that there are multiple tools underneath this one tool. And how do we know that? Well, look at this little triangle here in the corner. That tells me that I have more tools under there. So you should explore these tools, because look, there's our subselection tool. So in previous versions of Animate, the subselection tool is always open, but in this version, it's hidden. So we need to just be aware of that moving forward. Okay, so let's... Okay. So let's start our exercise here. You need the required files for this. So go grab them. You'll find them on Blackboard, and it is in the motion tweening exercise folder. So download and open up that folder, and open up the motiontween.fla file. And in this file, we've got three fish sitting here already. So the graphics have been created already, and we're going to take a look at creating a motion tween with these fish and have them swimming around. Okay, so let's look to our timeline. We're going to rename this layer here, layer 1. We're going to rename it Fish 1. And from the library, let's drag an instance of my fish 1 to the stage. And using your selection tool, that's this black selection tool here, let's just position the fish outside of the stage to the left. Okay, so here begins the steps to create a motion tween. So I'm pointing this out. From this point on, getting used to these steps is very important. Okay, so there are similarities to the classic motion tween. One major similarity is that we are going to use keyframes to create this tween. And we need at least 2 keyframes to create a motion tween, or a tween of any type. So we need a starting point and an end point. So we've created our starting point in frame 1. Now we need to plan ahead. How long is this animation going to be? It's going to be 90 frames long. So highlight frame 90, and you can right click on frame 90 and choose Insert Frame. Now here's something that's different. In a classic tween, we would insert a keyframe. We don't need to do that with a motion tween, which is great, because sometimes those keyframes can give us some trouble when we're trying to move them around on the timeline. So we're just going to insert a frame. This is going to be much easier for us. Okay, so we're going to insert a frame. Our animation is going to be 90 frames long. Now our next step, and again, these steps are really important. So we've got our starting point. We know it's going to be 90 frames, so we've inserted just a normal frame in frame 90. Now I'm going to right click anywhere on this frame span from 1 to 90 and choose Create Motion Tween. Do not choose Create Classic Tween. Choose Create Motion Tween, and our span becomes this wonderful looking kind of orangey brown, yellowish orangey brown. Okay, So, next, if we were to hit enter, nothing's going to happen. This is where we need to create our second keyframe. Remember, we need a starting point, which is here on frame 1, and an endpoint here on frame 90. So place your playhead at your endpoint, frame 90. Hold down the Shift key on your keyboard so this becomes a straight line, and grab the fish and move it off stage right. And look what happens here. Okay, so first off, we see this new line, dotted line that stretches across. This is called the motion path. And this is a very great thing. It's got a whole bunch of dots on it. And we're going to look at how to change the shape of this path very easily. But what are all these dots? These dots represent the frames along our timeline. So when our playhead's at frame 2, that's where the fish is. When our playhead's at frame 40, it's on the 40th dot here. Okay, so these dots are going to change, like the distance between them will change when we start adjusting the shape of this path, and we can add, we'll be looking at how to create an ease. So we'll talk about easing this week as well. But that's what those dots are all about. Okay, so now hit enter, and you'll see your fish moving along. Perfect. Nice and slow. Okay, here's the fun part, folks. This path here is very similar to a stroke. So a line or the stroke around a shape. When you float over it, look what happens. I'll zoom in. Our cursor shows a curve. And that tells me, just like the stroke around a shape or a line, that I can click and drag this and change its shape. Oh man, look at this. So I'm going to change the shape like this, and let's see what happens. Look at that. It was that easy. You can't do that with a classic tween. Look at, we're already learning one of the coolest aspects of this. Okay, so that tells me that this line is actually a shape. And that means any of the tools I would use to affect a shape, like any of these drawing tools here on the left, I'll be able to use on this line. Awesome. So we can create some really complex looking shapes for our fish. Okay. So now choose the subselection tool. And again, for me, it's hidden under the selection tool. The subselection tool is white. So choose the subselection tool. And here's a hot tip. If you, I always switch back to the selection tool when I'm done with the subselection tool, or else you may come across some issues when you're trying to select objects. Okay, the subselection tool goes deeper into the selection process. So I have this motion tween selected already, so it's visible here. And I can access some of the drawing points along this path. And there are what's called control points at either end of this path. I'm just going to move the fish here to the middle. And how do I know they're control points? Well, notice how this point is larger than these other dots here. So these are all diamonds, but this one is slightly larger. That tells me it's a control point. We'll look here too. Notice how that's larger. That is a control point. So if you click one of these, look what happens. And any of you with any experience in Adobe Illustrator will find this very familiar. Excuse me. And what we get here are what's called Bezier handles. These Bezier handles can control the curve of these control points. So if you click and drag, I'm going to this Bezier handle now. So again, all I did, folks, was select, I just clicked once the control point, and it revealed these Bezier handles. Now I can click and drag this Bezier handle, and look what happens. I can create a bit of an S. Oops. And if they disappear, just select the control point again with your sub-selection tool. And experiment with this a bit. Play around with it. I can create this S-looking shape now. And with the sub-selection tool, you can actually select one of these control points and move it without moving the other control point. So maybe I want him starting up here, and I want the other one. So you have to click on it first, select it first, then move it. And I want him starting or ending up down here. So play around with that for a little bit. Okay, so right now our fish is pointing forward when he or she is swimming along. That's not really how fish swim. They don't permanently look forward while they're going up and down swimming along. So what we need to do is what's called orienting to path. So first off, let's change back to our selection tool. And we want to select the path. So just click once on the path. And then open up your properties panel. And you'll see this checkbox for orient to path. So I'll just repeat that. Let's just say I don't have anything selected here. You may have selected the fish. You're not going to see orient to path here, I don't think, unless they've added it. Oops. You want to select the path. Click on the path, and it highlights, turns kind of a darker yellow, yellowish green. Then click on orient to path. Now let's watch the fish go. Okay, well, you can see that the fish changes its angle as it swims along, but it's not quite looking in the right direction. It's kind of almost as if it's just floating along. So we want to rotate the fish so it actually is facing in the right direction. So I'm just going to actually move my playhead to around here. It doesn't really matter where your playhead is sitting. I'm going to just move it here so I can see clearly where it needs to face. And then I'm going to turn on my transform tool, free transform tool, select the fish, and rotate. And now hit enter, and you can see the fish is more looking in the direction it should be looking. Also, I should point out in your timeline here, you'll see that there's a dot on every frame. And that's because essentially with orient to path on, there's a new property, a rotation property added to each frame. And Animate does this for you. So essentially it's creating keyframes on every frame to change the rotation of this object. But it does it for us, which is great. Okay, so now that we've got this fish here, I might have built this tween. It's looking great, but I'm not happy with the actual fish, the graphic. So we can swap this fish out for another fish. So select the fish on the stage. And look to your properties panel. Okay, so to swap out this fish for another fish, make sure the fish is selected, and click on, in your properties panel, this icon, swap symbol. And this box here will open up, this window. And you can select from your library the fish that you want to swap it for. So I'm going to choose my fish 2 and hit OK. Now after you do this, you take a look at if your fish is facing the right direction. So I'm going to turn on the transform tool, free transform tool, and just rotate the fish a little bit. And that looks a bit better. Okay, so another thing we can do on the topic of swapping is we can swap motion paths as well. So like I said, these motion paths are kind of like drawn objects. So if you want to cut and paste a motion path and use it several times, you can do it. Just like you would cut and paste an object that you may need more than one of. So it's just good to know those steps moving forward. Okay, so what we're going to do is copy this path and copy this fish, and we're going to duplicate it. So first off, let's rename this layer. We'll rename it fish 2 because that's what it is technically. And select the motion path on the stage. So let's make sure you have your selection tool on. Select the motion path on the stage and go edit, copy. And let's create a new layer in our timeline. We'll call it fish 1. And from your library, drag an instance of fish 1. Well, let's just make sure, let's move our playhead just to be safe back to frame 1. Okay, move your playhead back to frame 1. Now drag an instance, making sure you have the fish 1 layer selected. Drag an instance of our fish 1 to offstage left. And right click anywhere between frame 1 and 90 of the fish 1 layer and choose create motion tween. Now choose edit, paste in center, and that will paste the motion tween path, the motion path, to this object. Let's just back up. I'm going to hit undo. So your fish needs to be selected after you create this motion tween. After you convert this the frame span here to a motion tween. Select the fish, make sure it should be selected by default, then choose paste in center. And that pastes the path to our fish. Isn't that awesome? So these steps are kind of important moving forward, folks. So make sure you've got it right. And with this path now, I'm going to zoom out here because it goes off screen. I'm going to select the path, turn on my free transform tool, and transform it, rotate it a bit, change it, move it. Something like this. So it looks different from how it started, because we don't want the fish swimming along and it looking the same. So if you hit enter now, should look something like that. Now our fish still needs to be oriented to path. So select the path. You can switch back to your selection tool now if you like. Select the path, go to properties, and turn on orient to path. And maybe move your playhead back to here, and our fish is definitely not facing the right way. So select the fish, turn on your free transform tool, and rotate it so it is looking the right way. That looks better. Okay. So I definitely can't stress enough to just get used to all these steps, okay? Especially because it relates to our motion tween in-class assignment. So definitely practice these steps, and we're going to be doing a couple more exercises where you will be practicing. So when you've completed all the exercises from this week, if you still feel you need to practice, maybe come back to this one or repeat one of the other exercises. Okay, so let's look at another way to create a motion path. And this is one of my favorite ways of creating a motion path. You can actually draw a path and convert it to a motion path and then place an object on it. So let's look at how to do that. Let's create a new layer, and we'll call it circle. And let's for now, let's turn the visibility off of our other two fish. I'm going to just, so that is found here in the timeline. You click on these eyeballs to turn off visibility. And we're just going to, and you can lock those layers too, just so we're not on those layers while we're working. I think I've said that before, where I definitely recommend you locking layers that you're not currently working on, so you're not adding things to them by accident. All right, so we've got our new layer called circle. I'm going to just bring my playhead back to frame 1. And let's turn on the oval tool. So in your oval tool, turn that on, and in your properties panel, I'm going to choose no fill, and the stroke, can be black, and the stroke size can be 1. And I'm going to draw a circle on the stage. So I'm going to start kind of in the upper left corner up here, hold down shift so it's a perfect circle, and then drag down towards the bottom right. So for us to convert this into a motion path, every motion path needs both a start point and an end point. And just by its nature, a circle does not have a start or end point. It is just a solid line that just goes around and round and round. There's no start point or end point. So we need to create a start point and an end point. And we can do that quite easily with the eraser tool. And we're just going to erase a little tiny bit of the circle, so we do have a start point and an end point. So let's turn on our eraser tool. Okay, so to create this break point, which will create a start point and an end point for our path. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. We're going to add it to the bottom of our circle. So turn on your eraser tool, and in your properties panel, you'll see your eraser options. So let's choose a size. I'm going to choose 5 pixels. That should be enough to create our endpoint. Now, I've done this before by erasing just a 1 pixel space, but that is not enough. So to be safe, I'd say 4 or 5 pixels. Just do a quick swipe and that will erase that space. Okay. Now we have our start point and our end point to our circle. You can switch back to your selection tool now. Select the circle on the stage and go Edit, Cut, and that will delete it from the stage. Now add a new layer to your timeline. So that will delete it from the stage and also copy it. So add a new layer to your timeline called Fish 3. And let's, from our library, drag an instance of Fish 3 to the stage. And we want to convert this fish into a motion tween. So another way of creating a motion tween, I've shown you how to do it in the timeline here, right-clicking anywhere between frames 1 and 90 and choosing Create Motion Tween. We can also do it on the fish itself. So right-click on the fish, choose Create Motion Tween. And with all that still selected, choose Edit, Paste in Center, and look at that. There's that circle added as a motion path. Now, you just witnessed me trying to move the fish down. So look what happens when you just try and move the fish down. It kind of warps our circle. We don't want that. We want to highlight the motion path, then move it down like that. That will move everything nice and easily all the way down. So if I hit enter now, what is still left to do? Our fish, awesome. It is rotating around, perfect. But we need to orient it to path. So select the fish, go to properties, select the path, the motion path, go to properties and choose orient to path. And let's see how that looks. Looking good. All right, so now turn the visibility on of your other 2 fish. And let's see how all this looks together. Ooh. Okay, so now our animation is looking good. We want to now convert this FLA file to an HTML5 canvas. So to do that, we go to File, Convert to HTML5 canvas. Now, some of you have emailed me saying, I don't see that HTML5 canvas option in the Convert to menu. That probably means you're already an HTML5 canvas. So you're good to go. You already have it converted and you can move on. So in our case, our FLA file is not HTML5 canvas. So I'm going to choose HTML5 canvas. And it's asking me where I want to save it. And I'm just going to go to my folder and hit save. And now hit Control Enter. And now it is HTML based. Okay. So if anyone has any issues, definitely drop me a line through email and I can assist you, or you can attempt the exercise again.